The throne room stretched endlessly before Marcus Chun, its crystalline walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt his human eyes. He kept his gaze fixed on the polished floor, watching his reflection waver in the alien metal. The chains around his wrists were unnecessary. Where could he run on a ship traveling faster than light through the void between stars? Princess Zurahai stood beside the massive throne, her 4 arms crossed in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of defiance among her people, the Veltar. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow in the chamber's strange light, and her large, dark eyes never left his face. She had been the one to save him from the interrogation chambers, though he still didn't understand why. Queen Kethera rose from her throne like a mountain of living crystal and flesh. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, she was ancient even by Veltar standards, her skin having taken on the deep purple hue that marked the eldest of her race. Her 6 eyes, arranged in 2 rows across her elongated skull, fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made his knees shake. Human, the queen's voice resonated through the chamber, translated by the neural implant they had forced into his skull. You stand before the eternal throne of the Veltar Empire, in the presence of Queen Kethera, first of her name, conqueror of 7 systems, bringer of order to chaos. Marcus forced himself to look up, meeting her gaze. He had been a maintenance engineer on the human colony ship New Horizon when the Veltar had attacked. Out of 50,000 colonists, he was the only survivor they had bothered to keep alive. The others, he tried not to think about what had happened to the others. I know who you are, Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. The question is, what do you want with me? A ripple of shock ran through the assembled court. Several of the Veltar nobles hissed in their native tongue, their mandibles clicking in agitation. No one spoke to the queen with such casual disrespect. Queen Kethera's expression didn't change, but Marcus caught the slight twitch of her primary manipulator arms. Bold words for one whose species we have conquered. Your human colonies burn. Your ships drift as wreckage in the void. Yet you speak to me as if you have power here. Maybe I don't have power, Marcus replied, glancing at Princess Zurahai, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. But I have nothing left to lose either. So I'll ask again, what do you want? The queen stepped down from her throne, each footfall echoing through the chamber. When she reached Marcus, she towered over him, her shadow swallowing him completely. One of her lower arms extended, a single clawed finger tilting his chin up to force eye contact. Your species intrigues me, human. You are weak, short-lived, technologically primitive. Yet you fought us with a ferocity that caught even my generals by surprise. Ships with no hope of victory charged our battle lines. Soldiers with inferior weapons held positions until death claimed them. Even children threw themselves at our forces rather than surrender. Marcus felt a flicker of pride, despite his circumstances. We don't give up easy. No, the queen agreed, studying him with scientific interest. You do not. Which brings me to my proposition. She turned and began pacing, her 4 arms gesticulating as she spoke. The Veltar Empire spans 47 star systems. We have conquered hundreds of species, integrated their knowledge and technology into our own. We are strong, disciplined, logical. But we have grown predictable. Marcus frowned, unsure where this was going. Predictable? Our enemies know how we fight, how we think. The hegemony of Ash has begun to counter our strategies. The Silicon Collective adapts faster to our tactics than we can develop new ones. We need something they cannot predict. We need human unpredictability. You want me to help you fight your wars? Marcus couldn't hide his disgust. After you murdered my people? Queen Kethera stopped pacing and fixed him with all 6 eyes. I want you to become my personal strategist. In return, I will grant you access to our military archives, our technology, our star charts. You will help me win wars, and I will give you the tools to understand exactly how we defeated humanity, and perhaps how your species might have one. The offer hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt Princess Zurahai's eyes on him, but when he looked at her, her expression was unreadable. And if I refuse? Then you return to the interrogation chambers, where our scientists will extract every useful memory from your brain before discarding what remains. The Queen's voice carried no emotion, as if she were discussing the weather. Choose quickly, human. My patience has limits. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking of the new horizon, of his colleagues who had died in the attack, of the families he had watched evacuate to the escape pods, only to see those same pods destroyed by Veltar fighters. Every rational part of his mind screamed that he should refuse, that helping these monsters would be the ultimate betrayal. But another part, the part that had kept him alive through 3 days of torture and interrogation, whispered that this might be his only chance to learn their weaknesses, to find a way to make them pay. "I'll do it," he said finally. "But I have conditions." Several nobles hissed again, but the Queen raised a hand for silence. "You are hardly in a position to make demands, human." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed, "but you wouldn't be offering this deal if you didn't need what I can provide. So here are my terms. I want access to information about human colonies, any survivors, any resistance movements. I want to know about every battle, every engagement. And I want Princess Zarahai as my liaison." The last condition surprised even him. It had come out of his mouth without conscious thought. But something about the princess intrigued him. She had saved him from the interrogation chambers, risked punishment to tend his wounds, spoken to him with something approaching kindness in a place where he had found none. Queen Kithera's gaze shifted to her daughter, then back to Marcus. Why her specifically? Marcus met the princess's eyes, seeing something there he couldn't quite name. "She's the only one of you who seems to see me as more than an animal. If I'm going to help you, I need to work with someone who doesn't view humans as vermin." The Queen was silent for long moments, her 6 eyes studying both Marcus and her daughter with calculating intensity. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Very well. Princess Zarahai will serve as your liaison and supervisor. You will have access to our military archives, though certain classified materials remain off-limits until you prove your worth. As for human survivors..." She paused, and, for the first time, Marcus saw something that might have been cruel amusement in her expression. "There are more than you might think. But that information comes later, after you have shown me what human strategy can accomplish." Marcus felt his heart leap. More survivors? How many? Where? "When do I start?" he asked. "Now," the Queen replied, gesturing to Princess Zarahai. "My daughter will show you to your quarters and provide you with preliminary briefings. Your first test will be analyzing the tactical situation in the Kepler sector, where the Silicon Collective has been problematic." As the court began to disperse, Princess Zarahai approached Marcus. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns etched into her skin, some kind of ceremonial scarification that marked her royal status. Her lower set of arms remained clasped behind her back in what he was learning was a formal posture, while her upper arms gestured for him to follow. "Come," she said, her voice softer than her mother's but carrying its own authority. "We have much to discuss." As they left the throne room, Marcus caught one last glimpse of Queen Kithera. The ancient ruler was watching them leave with an expression he couldn't decipher. He had the uncomfortable feeling that he had just agreed to something far more complex than a simple advisory position. Princess Zarahai led him through corridors that defied human architectural understanding, their walls flowing like frozen liquid, embedded with veins of light that pulsed in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat. Other Veltar they passed in the corridors stepped aside respectfully for the princess, but their eyes tracked Marcus with mixtures of curiosity and disgust. "They have never seen a human work willingly with us," Zarahai explained, noticing his discomfort. "Most captured species require extensive conditioning before they can function in civilized society. And you think I don't?" She glanced at him sideways, her large dark eyes reflecting the corridor's bioluminescent glow. "I think you are more intelligent than my mother gives you credit for. And more dangerous." They entered what Marcus assumed was a lift, though it moved laterally as much as vertically, carrying them through the ship's vast interior. Through transparent sections of the wall, he caught glimpses of the vessel's impossible scale. Manufacturing bays large enough to construct smaller ships, hydroponic gardens that stretched beyond the horizon, residential districts that could house millions. "How big is this ship?" he asked. "The Eternal Sovereign is a world ship-class vessel," Zarahai replied with obvious pride. 40 kilometers long, 15 kilometers wide, home to 12 million Veltar and associated species. It is the flagship of our empire, the mobile seat of my mother's power. Marcus tried to wrap his mind around the scale. The New Horizon had been humanity's largest construction project, carrying 50,000 colonists across interstellar space. This single ship held more than 200 times that number. "How many ships like this do you have?" 7 world ships, each commanding a fleet of several thousand vessels. Zarahai's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing grocery lists rather than military forces that dwarfed anything humanity had ever assembled. They reached what Zarahai called the diplomatic quarter, though Marcus suspected it was more accurately described as high-security housing for valuable prisoners. His quarters were larger than his apartment back on Earth had been, with a wide viewport showing the stars wheeling slowly past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. "These will be your living spaces," Zarahai said, gesturing around the room. "Food will be provided according to human nutritional requirements. We have extensive databases on your species' needs. If you require anything else for your comfort or efficiency, inform me." Marcus walked to the viewport, pressing his palm against the transparent aluminum. Somewhere out there, human colonies were burning, human refugees were fleeing through space in whatever ships they could find. And he was here, agreeing to help their conquerors become more efficient killers. "Princess," he said without turning around, "why did you save me from the interrogation chambers?" He heard her shift behind him, the subtle sound of her ceremonial armor adjusting. "You interest me," she said finally. "That's not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you now." Her voice carried a note of something. Regret? Warning? "My mother believes she understands human nature, but she thinks in terms of conquest and subjugation. She sees your species as useful tools, nothing more." Marcus turned to face her. "And what do you see?" Zarahai was quiet for a long moment, her 4 arms held in a posture he didn't recognize. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I see a people who chose to fight a war they could not win rather than accept slavery. I see a species that values individual choice over collective survival. I see." She paused, as if searching for words. "I see something my people may have lost long ago." "What's that?" "The courage to defy impossible odds for principle alone." Before Marcus could respond, she turned toward the door. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we begin your education in Veltar military doctrine. The Kepler sector situation is more complex than my mother indicated. The Silicon Collective has developed new tactics that have cost us 3 fleets in the past 2 months. 3 fleets. Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. For what he had seen, Veltar fleets were massive formations. Losing 3 of them suggested their enemies were far more capable than Queen Kethera had implied. "Yes," Zarahai confirmed, pausing at the threshold, "which is why we need your help. The Collective learns our patterns faster than we can adapt them. They think like us, logically, predictably. But humans..." She looked back at him with something that might have been hope. "Humans think in ways that defy logic. Perhaps that is what we need now." After she left, Marcus stood alone in his luxurious prison, staring out at the stars. He thought about his crewmates on the New Horizon, about the families in the escape pods, about the colonies that had already fallen to the Veltar advance. He had made a deal with monsters, and every part of him that remained human rebelled against it. But he was still alive, and as long as he was alive, he could learn. He could find weaknesses, and maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to make the Veltar pay for every human life they had taken. The door chimed, and a service construct entered, one of the artificial beings the Veltar used for menial labor. It was humanoid, but clearly artificial, with synthetic skin over a mechanical frame. In its hands, it carried a data tablet, and what appeared to be human-style clothing. "Greetings, strategist Marcus," the construct said in perfect English. "I am designated as your personal assistant. My designation is 7 of Interface. I will help you access information systems and translate cultural concepts between human and Veltar understanding." Marcus took the tablet, noting its alien design but familiar function. "You speak English very well. I was programmed with complete human linguistic databases after your species was encountered," 7 of Interface replied. "I also have access to human cultural references, historical data, and psychological profiles. The Queen wishes you to be as comfortable and efficient as possible." "How thoughtful of her," Marcus said dryly. He activated the tablet, and immediately data began flowing across its screen: star charts, fleet compositions, battle reports. It was more military intelligence than humanity had ever gathered about any alien species, and it was being handed to him freely. "There's one more thing," 7 of Interface said, its artificial voice carrying what sounded almost like hesitation. "A private message from Princess Zarahai." The construct extended another device, a smaller tablet with a personal encryption seal. Marcus took it and activated the screen. Zarahai's face appeared, but this recording had been made in private, without the formal bearing she maintained in public. "Marcus," her recorded voice said, "what I told you about human courage was not merely observation. There are things about this war, about my people's actions, that even I am not proud of. If you truly wish to help your species, then prove to my mother that humans can be valuable allies rather than conquered subjects. Show her that partnership yields better results than slavery." The recording paused, and Zarahai looked directly into the camera with an intensity that made Marcus feel as if she were in the room with him. "But be careful," she continued. "There are factions at court who believe any alien species capable of threatening Veltar supremacy should be exterminated entirely. Your success here may determine whether the surviving human colonies receive mercy or annihilation." The recording ended, leaving Marcus staring at a blank screen. He was no longer just trying to learn his enemy's weaknesses. He was in a race to prove human worth before someone decided it would be easier to finish what the invasion fleets had started. He looked out at the stars again, but now they seemed less like distant lights and more like the scattered remnants of human civilization, hanging in the void and waiting to see if one maintenance engineer could somehow tip the scales of an interstellar war. Tomorrow, his real education would begin. Tonight, he would mourn the dead and prepare to face an impossible task, convincing the conquerors of humanity that their former prey might be worthy of becoming their equals. The weight of 50 billion human lives rested on his shoulders now. He only hoped he was strong enough to carry at the war room was a hemisphere of pure information, its walls displaying real-time tactical data from across the Veltar Empire. Star systems pulsed with different colors indicating their status: blue for secure territory, yellow for contested space, red for active combat zones. Marcus stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of the conflict he was now part of. Princess Zarahai moved gracefully around the displays, her 4 arms manipulating holographic controls with practiced ease. "This is the Kepler sector," she said, highlighting a region where red warning indicators clustered like infected wounds. 17 star systems, 8 inhabited worlds, strategic importance due to rare mineral deposits essential for hyperdrive construction. Marcus studied the tactical display, trying to process information that would have taken human intelligence agencies months to gather. And the Silicon Collective has been pushing into this region. "More than pushing," Zarahai replied grimly. "They have developed new ship designs that our standard doctrine cannot effectively counter. Observe." The display shifted to show recent battle footage. Marcus watched Veltar fleet formations, the disciplined, hierarchical arrangements he was beginning to recognize, engaging what looked like clouds of smaller vessels. The Silicon Collective ships moved like a swarm, individual units seeming to act independently while maintaining overall coordination. Your fleets are fighting them like they're traditional formations, Marcus observed. But they're not. They're more like— He paused, searching for the right analogy. Like a school of fish. Or a flock of birds. Explain, Zarahai said, her large eyes focusing intently on him. Marcus walked closer to the display, studying the movement patterns. Look at how they respond to your attacks. When you fire on one section, the others don't maintain formation to support it. They flow around the damage, regroup, keep moving. They're treating their fleet like a single organism instead of individual ships with individual roles. He gestured at the Veltar formations. But your forces are still thinking in terms of traditional naval tactics, flagship, escorts, support vessels, defined hierarchies. Against an enemy that doesn't recognize those structures, that approach becomes a weakness. Zarahai manipulated the controls, replaying the battle from different angles. The Silicon Collective are artificial intelligences, she said. They think in network processes, shared consciousness across multiple platforms. Our strategists believe their ship designs would reflect this, that they would be predictable in their coordination. They are predictable, Marcus said, surprising her. Just not in the way your people expected. They're following biological patterns instead of technological ones. Swarm behavior, emergent intelligence, adaptive response patterns, principles that evolved in nature long before anyone built computers. He turned to face her, excitement building despite the grim circumstances. Princess, may I access your tactical databases? I want to look at every engagement with the Silicon Collective over the past year. For the next 6 hours, Marcus immersed himself in data. Battle reports, fleet compositions, casualty assessments, tactical analyses from Veltar commanders. He absorbed it all with the focused intensity that had made him one of the best systems engineers on the New Horizon. Zarahai remained present throughout, occasionally clarifying alien military terminology or providing context about Veltar strategic doctrine. Here, Marcus said finally, highlighting patterns in the data. Look at these engagement zones. Every time your fleets try to divide the collective forces, they adapt within hours. But there's a pattern to how they adapt. They're following optimization algorithms, finding the most efficient response to each tactical challenge. Zarahai leaned closer to the display, close enough that Marcus caught her scent, something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. You can predict their adaptations? Better than that, Marcus said, his mind racing with possibilities. I think I can force them into adaptations that actually make them weaker. Swarm intelligence is incredibly effective, but it has a fundamental vulnerability. It's reactive. It responds to threats by evolving countermeasures. But what if we presented them with a threat that couldn't be countered by evolution alone? He began manipulating the holographic display, sketching out formations and movement patterns. Human military doctrine has always been built around improvisation and adaptability, partly because we never had enough resources to rely on overwhelming force. We had to be unpredictable, creative, willing to sacrifice efficiency for tactical surprise. Show me, Zarahai said, her voice carrying both skepticism and curiosity. Marcus began designing a battle plan, using the war room's sophisticated modeling systems to test his theories. Instead of the traditional Veltar formation, disciplined ranks of capital ships supported by smaller vessels, he created something that looked almost chaotic to alien eyes. Mixed unit types in seemingly random distributions, he explained as he worked. Fast attack craft positioned where doctrine says they should have heavy cruisers. Capital ships operating alone instead of in mutual support formations. Support vessels functioning as independent raiders rather than fleet auxiliaries. Zarahai studied the formation with obvious confusion. This formation has no structure, no clear command hierarchy. How would orders be transmitted? How would units coordinate? They wouldn't, Marcus said simply. Not in the traditional sense. Each unit group would have specific objectives, but complete tactical freedom in how they achieve them. The overall battle plan would be deliberately fragmented, with individual commanders encouraged to improvise based on local conditions. He activated the simulation, running the chaotic human formation against the Silicon Collective swarm tactics. At first, the battle proceeded as expected. The AI forces began adapting to counter what they perceived as threats. But then something interesting happened. There, Marcus pointed to the display as the simulation played out. The collective ships are trying to optimize against multiple tactical approaches simultaneously. But because our units are acting independently, using different tactics at different times, the swarm can't find a stable counter-adaptation. The simulated battle showed the AI forces becoming increasingly erratic, their coordination breaking down as they struggled to respond to targets that refused to behave predictably. Individual collective ships began making suboptimal decisions, and the swarm's emergent intelligence started to fragment. You are using their intelligence against them. The more they try to adapt, the more confused they become. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. Swarm intelligence works by finding patterns and optimizing against them. But if there are no stable patterns to optimize against, the system becomes increasingly inefficient until it breaks down entirely. They were interrupted by the arrival of another Veltar, a massive male with a deep purple skin and multiple scars that marked a veteran military commander. His 6 eyes took in the tactical display with obvious disapproval. "Princess Zarahai," he said, his voice carrying formal military courtesy that barely concealed hostility. "I am General Thexmore, Supreme Commander of the Kepler Sector Fleet. I have come to evaluate this human's tactical recommendations." Marcus felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. General Thexmore's gaze fixed on him with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "General," Zarahai replied with equal formality, "strategist Marcus has developed promising countermeasures against the Silicon Collective's adaptive tactics." "Has he?" Thexmore moved to the display, his massive form dwarfing both Marcus and the princess. "And what experience does this creature have commanding fleets in battle? What understanding does he possess of Veltar military doctrine, developed over millennia of conquest?" Marcus felt his temper flare, but forced himself to remain calm. "General, with respect, your millennia of doctrine is exactly the problem. The Silicon Collective has studied every battle the Veltar have ever fought. They know your patterns, your strategies, your responses to every tactical situation. That's why they're winning." The general's mandibles clicked ominously, a threat display Marcus had learned to recognize. The collective has achieved temporary tactical advantages through superior numbers and unconventional ship designs. This does not constitute winning, human. 3 fleets destroyed in 2 months, Marcus replied evenly. "How many ships is that, General? How many Veltar lives lost because your commanders couldn't adapt to an enemy that doesn't fight by your rules?" For a moment, Marcus thought Thexmore might strike him. The general's lower arms clenched into fists, and his scarred hide flushed darker with anger. But Princess Zarahai stepped between them. "General," she said quietly, "perhaps we should review the tactical analysis before dismissing it." Thexmore's gaze shifted to her, and Marcus caught the complex interplay of respect, frustration, and something else, protectiveness, in the alien's expression. "Princess, this human has been among us for less than a day. He knows nothing of our capabilities, our honor, our traditions. To place the fate of imperial fleets in such hands would be the height of folly." And yet, Zarahai replied with steel in her voice, "Our traditions and honor have not prevented the loss of those 3 fleets. Perhaps it is time to consider alternatives." The debate that followed was conducted in rapid Veltar, too fast for Marcus's implant to translate effectively. But the body language was clear enough. Thexmore arguing passionately for traditional approaches, Zarahai defending the need for innovation, both of them occasionally gesturing toward Marcus as if he weren't present. Finally, a general turned back to him. "Very well, human. I will grant you an opportunity to prove your theories. You will have command of a single squadron, 12 light cruisers, and their escorts. If your tactics prove effective against a collective probe force, we will consider broader implementation. Marcus felt his heart sink. A single squadron against an enemy that had destroyed entire fleets. General, the tactics I've proposed require larger formations to be effective. A squadron won't have enough tactical diversity to confuse the collective's adaptation algorithms. Then, you will fail, Fexmore replied bluntly, and we will return to proven methods. After the general left, Marcus slumped into one of the war room's alien chairs, designed for Veltar physiology, but adjustable enough to accommodate human proportions. You want me to fail? He said to Zarahai. Yes, she agreed matter-of-factly. General Fexmore is old military aristocracy. He believes alien tactical input undermines Veltar racial superiority. But he also cannot openly defy a direct order from the Queen to test your capabilities. So he's given me an impossible task and expects me to prove his point by failing at it. Zarahai moved to stand beside his chair, her forearms clasped behind her back in the formal posture Marcus was learning to read as thoughtful consideration. Perhaps he has given you exactly what you need to prove yours. Marcus looked up at her in surprise. How do you figure that? A single squadron must rely on speed, flexibility, and innovation to survive, she explained. The very qualities you claim human tactics emphasize. If you can achieve victory with limited resources against superior numbers, it will demonstrate the value of your approach more effectively than any large-scale success that could be attributed to material advantage. She had a point, but Marcus wasn't sure it mattered. Princess, I'm a maintenance engineer. I've never commanded anything larger than a repair crew. Even if my theories are sound, I don't have the experience to implement them in actual combat. Then, you will learn, Zarahai said simply. I will assist you. As your liaison, I have full authority to provide whatever support you require. Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into preparation with desperate intensity. He studied every aspect of the squadron he would command, ship capabilities, crew compositions, equipment loadouts, tactical doctrines. The vessels were typical Veltar light cruisers, fast, well-armed, designed for reconnaissance and harassment rather than direct confrontation. But as he learned more about them, Marcus began to see possibilities that their designers had never intended. The ship's modular construction allowed for rapid reconfiguration of systems. Their advanced sensor arrays could be modified to jam enemy communications rather than simply gathering intelligence. Their high-speed engines could be overcharged for short bursts of incredible acceleration. You are thinking like a human, Zarahai observed one evening as she found him still working in the war room, surrounded by technical specifications and tactical projections. What do you mean? She gestured at his work. A Veltar commander would focus on optimizing the squadron's efficiency within established parameters. You are instead asking how the parameters themselves might be changed. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. On Earth, we had a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When you don't have enough resources to win through conventional means, you have to find unconventional ones. And if your unconventional methods result in the destruction of Imperial ships and the death of their crews, it was a question that had haunted Marcus for days. He was about to take command of vessels crewed by the same species that had destroyed his world, killed his friends, enslaved his people. Part of him whispered that their deaths would be justice, that he should let them die and claim his tactics had failed. But he thought of Princess Zarahai's words about proving human worth, about earning mercy for the surviving colonies. And beneath that, he found something else, professional pride. He had been challenged to solve an impossible problem, and every instinct he possessed as an engineer rebelled against accepting failure. Then, I'll have failed, he said finally, but I'll have failed trying to save lives rather than waste them. Even Veltar lives. Something in Zarahai's expression shifted, a subtle change in the set of her features that Marcus couldn't interpret. You continue to surprise me, she said softly. How so? Most conquered species either embrace vengeance when given power over their captors, or become so eager to please that they lose all dignity. You seem to be doing neither. Marcus considered this. Maybe that's what makes us human. We're stubborn enough to stick to our principles even when it would be easier to abandon them. The next morning brought word that a Silicon Collective probe force had been detected entering the Kepler sector. Marcus's squadron was ordered to intercept and engage, with the implicit understanding that this would likely be a one-way mission for both the ships and their untested human commander. As Marcus prepared to board the squadron flagship, a sleek light cruiser designated Swift Judgment, Princess Zurahai, appeared at the docking bay. She wore full ceremonial armor now, her status as royalty proclaimed by the intricate designs etched into the alien metal. "I will be accompanying the squadron as observer," she announced to the assembled officers. Marcus felt a stab of alarm. "Princess, that's not necessary. If my tactics fail, if your tactics fail, then I will report that failure to the Queen," she interrupted. "And if they succeed, I will report that as well. Either way, accurate observation requires presence at the battle." The squadron commanders, all experienced Veltar officers who clearly resented taking orders from a human, listened with barely concealed hostility as Marcus outlined his battle plan. It was unlike anything in their training, requiring individual initiative and tactical flexibility that ran counter to millennia of military doctrine. "You ask us to abandon formation discipline," objected Commander Kethval of the Piercing Star, "to operate without centralized coordination. This is not tactics, it is chaos." "It's controlled chaos," Marcus replied patiently. "Each of you has specific objectives, but complete freedom in how you achieve them. The enemy will try to predict and counter our actions, but they can't counter what they can't predict." As the squadron departed the Eternal Sovereign and moved toward the intercept coordinates, Marcus found himself on the bridge of a warship for the first time in his life. The Swift Judgment's captain, a scarred veteran named Zethura, made no effort to hide her skepticism about her new commanding officer. "Strategist," she said, the title carrying obvious reluctance. "We are approaching sensor range of the collective probe force. Initial readings suggest 15 vessels, mixed configuration, following standard swarm deployment patterns." Marcus studied the tactical display, his mouth dry with nervous anticipation. Everything he had learned about the Silicon Collective, everything he thought he understood about their weaknesses, was about to be tested in lethal reality. "All ships," he transmitted to the squadron, "remember, no predictable patterns, no standard responses. Trust your instincts and adapt to local conditions. We're not trying to outfight them. We're trying to confuse them long enough to exploit the confusion." The collective ships appeared on long-range sensors like a cloud of deadly insects, their movements already beginning to shift into adaptive formations as they detected the approaching Veltar squadron. Marcus took a deep breath and gave the order that would either prove his theories or result in the death of everyone under his command. "All ships, execute Chaos Protocol. Break formation and engage at will." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded Veltar history. The battle began exactly as Marcus had predicted it would, with the Silicon Collective forces attempting to counter what they perceived as chaotic Veltar tactics by implementing adaptive response patterns. What they couldn't account for was just how chaotic those tactics really were. Commander Kethval's Piercing Star came in fast and low, using a nearby asteroid field for cover before launching a surprise attack on the Collective's left flank. But instead of following up with supporting fire as doctrine demanded, the ship immediately withdrew, leaving the AI forces to commit resources to counter an attack that was already over. Meanwhile, Captain Zethura took the Swift Judgment on a seemingly suicidal charge directly toward the enemy center, all weapons firing. The collective ships moved to intercept, their swarm intelligence calculating optimal firing solutions and defensive positions. But just as they committed to their formation, Marcus ordered the ship into a radical course change, using the light cruiser's high-speed engines to escape the trap, while two other squadron members struck the now exposed enemy flanks. "This is insane," Zathera muttered as she pulled the ship through a maneuver that pushed the inertial compensators to their limits. We should be destroyed by now. Marcus watched the tactical display with growing excitement. The collective ships were indeed trying to adapt, but every time they optimized for one threat pattern, the Veltar squadron shifted to something completely different. Individual ships acted like raiders, support vessels functioned as attackers. The entire formation flowed and changed without any apparent central plan. Princess, he called to Zurahai, who was observing from a secondary bridge station. Are you recording this? Every moment, she confirmed, her 4 arms working multiple control systems simultaneously. The collective forces are showing signs of coordination breakdown. Their response time to tactical changes is increasing significantly. She was right. Marcus could see it happening on the display. Individual collective ships, beginning to make suboptimal decisions as their shared intelligence struggled to process contradictory tactical data. The swarm's elegant coordination was fragmenting into increasingly random movements. All ships, Marcus transmitted, initiate Phase 2. Begin harassment protocols. What followed was something that would have horrified traditional military commanders on both sides. Instead of seeking decisive engagement, the Veltar squadron began what could only be described as systematic annoyance. Ships would dart in, fire a few shots, then retreat before the enemy could respond effectively. Attack patterns change constantly, sometimes focusing fire on single targets, sometimes spreading damage across multiple vessels, sometimes ignoring combat entirely to jam communications or disrupt sensor arrays. The Silicon Collective's response became increasingly erratic. Their ships started overcorrecting for threats that never materialized, wasting energy and positioning themselves poorly for actual attacks. The swarm intelligence that had made them so dangerous against traditional formations was becoming a liability as it tried to optimize against patterns that didn't actually exist. Collective formation is collapsing, reported the sensor officer, excitement breaking through his usual Veltar stoicism. Multiple ships are operating outside optimal parameters. 2 vessels appear to be interfering with each other's targeting solutions. Marcus felt a surge of triumph, but forced himself to stay focused. All ships prepare for final phase engagement. Remember, hit hard, hit fast, then get out. Don't give them time to adapt. The coup de grace came when Commander Kethval, finally, understanding what Marcus was trying to accomplish, led 3 ships in a coordinated assault that looked like a standard Veltar attack formation. The collective forces, desperate to respond to something they could recognize and counter, committed heavily to defending against the apparent conventional assault. But it was a feint. While the enemy focused on Kethval's group, the rest of the squadron struck from multiple unexpected angles, their attacks precisely timed to arrive just as the collective ships were locked into their defensive positions. 7 enemy vessels were destroyed in less than 3 minutes. The remaining 8, their coordination completely broken, scattered in different directions as their individual AI cores abandoned swarm cooperation in favor of individual survival protocols. The bridge of the Swift Judgment was silent for long moments after the enemy withdrew. Marcus stared at the tactical display, hardly believing what had just happened. A single Veltar squadron had defeated a collective probe force that should have been more than a match for them, and they had done it with minimal casualties. Only 2 ships damaged, no crew losses. Strategist Marcus, Captain Zathera said slowly, I owe you an apology, and perhaps my life. The response from the fleet was immediate and dramatic. General Thexmore arrived aboard the Swift Judgment within hours, his massive form barely contained by the shuttle that brought him from the sector command ship. Marcus expected anger, accusations that the victory had been lucky or achieved through unacceptably risky tactics. Instead, the general stood before Marcus with something approaching awe in his 6 eyes. Human, he said formally, I have reviewed the complete battle recordings. Your tactics violated every principle of Veltar military doctrine. They were chaotic, undisciplined, seemingly random. He paused, his mandibles clicking in what Marcus had learned was deep thought. They were also brilliantly effective. Thank you, General. Do not misunderstand me. Thexmore continued. I'm not yet convinced that such methods can be scaled up to fleet-level operations. But you have demonstrated that there is value in your unconventional approach. The Queen has ordered full tactical debriefings and analysis of your methods. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself at the center of a revolution in Veltar military thinking. His battle records were disseminated throughout the fleet, studied by tactical analysts who struggled to understand how chaos could be more effective than order. Squadron commanders began experimenting with modified versions of his approach, adapting human unpredictability to Veltar capabilities. The results were dramatic. Collective probe forces that had been pushing deeper into Veltar space suddenly found themselves facing enemies they couldn't predict or counter. The swarm intelligence that had made the Silicon Collective so dangerous became increasingly ineffective as it encountered tactical patterns that defied logical analysis. But success brought new challenges. Marcus found himself summoned to strategy conferences with high-ranking military officials. His opinions sought on everything from ship design to long-term strategic planning. The attention was flattering and terrifying in equal measure. He was still a maintenance engineer pretending to be a military strategist, and the weight of responsibility grew heavier with each victory attributed to his methods. Princess Zarahai remained his constant companion and advocate, helping him navigate the complex politics of the Veltar military hierarchy. But Marcus began to sense something more than professional interest in her attention. "You are troubled," she observed one evening as they reviewed reports from the latest engagement. A full fleet action where modified human tactics had resulted in a decisive Veltar victory against a major collective force. They were in Marcus's quarters, the space having been expanded and equipped with advanced tactical analysis equipment as his role became more prominent. Through the viewport, the Eternal Sovereign moved through hyperspace toward the Kepler sector's capital system, where Queen Kethera would preside over a ceremony honoring the recent victories. "I'm in over my head," Marcus admitted, gesturing at the reports surrounding them. 3 months ago, I was fixing life support systems and arguing with inventory databases. Now I'm supposedly responsible for revolutionizing interstellar warfare. Zarahai moved closer, her ceremonial armor replaced by simpler clothing that made her seem less alien, more approachable. "You underestimate yourself. The tactics you developed have saved thousands of Veltar lives and turned the tide of an entire campaign." "Have they?" Marcus asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "Or have I just given your people better ways to kill their enemies? Every victory report talks about enemy casualties, destroyed ships, conquered territory. What about the Silicon Collective crews who died because I made their defenses ineffective?" The question had been haunting him as reports of victories accumulated. The Silicon Collective were artificial intelligences, but they were still sentient beings with their own civilization, their own right to exist. By helping the Veltar defeat them, was he simply trading one form of genocide for another? "The Collective began this war," Zarahai replied quietly. "They attacked our border colonies without provocation, enslaved entire populations to serve as computational resources for their networks. We fight them in self-defense, just like you attacked human colonies in self-defense." Marcus's voice carried more bitterness than he intended. Zarahai was silent for a long moment, her large eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "No," she said. "The human campaign was not self-defense. It was expansion, conquest for the sake of demonstrating Veltar supremacy. I know this because I was there." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "You participated in the invasion?" "I commanded a battle group during the assault on your colony convoy," she admitted, her 4 arms clasped tightly behind her back. 17 human ships, including your New Horizon. We destroyed 14 of them, captured the other 3 for interrogation purposes." The confession hit Marcus like a physical blow. The princess who had saved him, who had become his ally and friend, had been directly responsible for the deaths of thousands of his people. His hands clenched into fists as images flashed through his memory. The New Horizon shaking under weapons fire, escape pods launching into space, the screams over the comm channels as they were picked off by Veltar fighters. "How many?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled rage. 47,312 humans died in that engagement, Zarahai replied, meeting his gaze steadily despite the pain in her voice. "I know the exact number because I have carried it with me every day since." Marcus stood abruptly, walking to the viewport and pressing his palms against the transparent aluminum. He wanted to hate her, wanted to rage at her for the lives she had taken. But he found that he couldn't. Not entirely. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know," she said. "And because I need you to understand why I saved you from the interrogation chambers." "Guilt." "Partly." Zarahai moved to stand beside him, though she was careful not to touch. "But also recognition. During the battle, one of your ships, a small cargo vessel with no military capabilities, placed itself between our forces and a group of escape pods. The crew had to know they could not survive, yet they bought time for civilians to reach the hyperspace jump point." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the determination. Captain Sarah Kim and her crew. They saved about 3,000 people. "I gave the order to destroy that ship," Zarahai continued, her voice heavy with regret. "But as I watched it die, I realized I was witnessing something I had never seen before. Beings willing to sacrifice everything for others who could give them nothing in return. It was beautiful and terrible." "So you decided to collect a human as a pet? A living reminder of your noble enemies?" "No," Zarahai said firmly. "I decided that a species capable of such selflessness deserved better than extinction. When the Queen proposed using you as a military advisor, I saw an opportunity to prove that humans could be valuable allies rather than conquered subjects." Marcus turned to face her, seeing something in her alien features that might have been hope. "And if I had failed, if my tactics hadn't worked, then I would have failed as well," she admitted. "And your people would have faced the same fate as dozens of other species who could not prove their worth to the Empire." The weight of that revelation settled over Marcus like a shroud. He had thought he was fighting to prove human tactical value, to earn some measure of respect from his captors. But the stakes had been far higher. He had been fighting for the survival of his entire species, and he hadn't even known it. "Princess," he said carefully, "what happens now? I've proven that human tactics have value, helped win battles against the collective. Does that mean the surviving colonies are safe?" Zarahai's expression grew troubled. "Safer than they were," she replied. "But there are still those at court who view any independent-minded species as a long-term threat. General Thexmore has become an advocate for your methods, but others argue that humans should be modified to ensure loyalty." "Modified how?" "Neural conditioning, behavioral programming, genetic alterations to reduce aggression and independence." Her voice carried disgust for the concepts she was describing. "They would make humans into perfect servants, intelligent enough to be useful, docile enough to never rebel." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. "And the Queen? What does she think?" "My mother is pragmatic," Zarahai said diplomatically. "She values results above all else. As long as human tactical innovations continue to provide military advantages, she will protect your species' autonomy. But if that advantage ever disappears..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus understood perfectly. Humanity's survival depended on continued usefulness to the Veltar Empire. The moment they stopped being valuable allies, they would become either enslaved subjects or extinct annoyances. "There's something else," Zarahai continued. "The ceremony tomorrow is more than just a recognition of military success. The Queen plans to announce a new phase in human integration with the Empire. You are to be elevated to the rank of strategic advisor, with authority over tactical development for the entire Kepler sector fleet." Marcus should have felt triumph at the promotion, but instead he felt only dread. More responsibility, More pressure to keep proving human worth. Yes, Zarahai agreed, but also more opportunity to influence policy, to shape how humans are treated within the empire. The position comes with significant authority, including the right to advocate for mercy toward human survivors and input on colonial administration policies. Before Marcus could respond, his door chimed with an incoming communication. 7 of interface materialized as a holographic projection, its artificial features set in what passed for urgency among the constructs. Strategist Marcus, it said, priority communication from the Outer Colonies Command. Long-range sensors have detected massive Silicon Collective fleet movements, at least 12,000 ships massing in the Vega system. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. 12,000 ships. Confirmed, 7 of interface replied. Intelligence analysis suggests they are preparing for a major offensive against the Kepler sector. Estimated time to arrival, 6 days. Zarahai moved swiftly to the communication console. Are our forces sufficient to repel an attack of that magnitude? Negative, Princess. Current Kepler sector fleet strength is approximately 4,000 vessels, including support and logistics ships. Even with the tactical advantages provided by strategist Marcus's methods, the numerical disparity is too great for conventional engagement. After the construct disappeared, Marcus and Zarahai stood in stunned silence. Everything they had accomplished, every victory they had won, seemed insignificant in the face of such overwhelming force. The Silicon Collective had apparently decided that adaptive swarm tactics were insufficient. They were resorting to simple numerical superiority. We need to evacuate, Marcus said finally. Pull back to a more defensible position. Concentrate our forces. No, Zarahai interrupted, her voice carrying new determination. Retreat would be seen as failure of human tactical doctrine. The factions that oppose your methods would use it as evidence that chaos tactics cannot handle large-scale engagements. Princess, I don't care about politics right now. 12,000 ships would destroy any conventional fleet we could assemble, she agreed. But you have not been developing conventional tactics. And perhaps it is time to test human strategic thinking on the largest possible scale. Marcus stared at her. You wanted to fight 12,000 ships with 4,000. I want you to prove that human unpredictability can overcome any odds, she replied. Because if you cannot, then my people will conclude that humans have outlived their usefulness. And you know what happens then? As they prepared for what might be the most important battle in human history, Marcus found himself facing a terrible irony. He had begun this journey seeking revenge against the Veltar for destroying his world. Now he was fighting desperately to save the same species that had conquered his people, because their survival had somehow become inextricably linked with humanity's own. The next 6 days would determine whether Marcus Chun, maintenance engineer turned military strategist, could work one more miracle, or whether both humans and Veltar would fall before the silicon tide advancing toward them through the darkness between stars. The assembled fleet hung in space like a constellation of deadly stars. 4,000 Veltar vessels arranged in formations that would have been incomprehensible to military strategists just months earlier. Marcus stood in the command center of the Eternal Sovereign, surrounded by holographic displays showing every ship under his command, and tried not to think about the impossible odds they faced. Queen Kithara had arrived personally to oversee the battle, her massive form dominating the bridge as she consulted with her admirals and generals. The ceremony honoring Marcus's previous victories had been postponed indefinitely. There would be time for celebrations only if any of them survived the next few days. Strategic Advisor Chun, the Queen said, using his new title with careful formality, present your battle plan. Marcus activated the main tactical display, showing the Kepler sector and the advancing Silicon Collective Armada. 12,000 ships moving in perfect coordination, their swarm intelligence focused on a single objective, the complete destruction of Veltar forces in the sector. Your Majesty, Marcus began, his voice steadier than he felt. Conventional tactical analysis suggests this battle cannot be won through direct engagement. The enemy has a 3-to-1 numerical advantage, and their ships are specifically designed to counter traditional Veltar formations. Then, you propose retreat? General Thexmore asked. Over the past months, the scarred veteran had become one of Marcus's strongest supporters, but even he sounded skeptical about their chances. No, General. I propose something far more dangerous. Marcus manipulated the display, showing the fleet formations he had spent 6 days developing. We're going to split our forces into 16 independent task groups, each operating with complete tactical autonomy. A ripple of shock ran through the assembled commanders. Princess Zarahai, standing at her mother's right hand, leaned forward with obvious concern. Strategic advisor, she said carefully, dividing our forces in the face of superior numbers violates every principle of military science. The enemy will defeat us piecemeal. Not if they can't predict where the pieces are going to be, Marcus replied. He expanded the display to show projected movement patterns. Not the orderly formations Veltar commanders expected, but something that looked almost organic in its complexity. Each task group will operate independently, with orders to avoid direct engagement with superior forces while disrupting enemy operations through hit and run attacks, supply line interdiction, and psychological warfare. The collective swarm intelligence works by processing tactical data and optimizing responses, but it can only optimize against patterns it can recognize. Admiral Kethnara, the Queen's senior naval commander, studied the display with obvious confusion. Strategic advisor, these movement patterns appear random. How do you ensure our forces don't interfere with each other? How do you coordinate strategic objectives without central command? Marcus had been dreading this question because the honest answer sounded insane even to him. We don't coordinate in the traditional sense, Admiral. Each task group has a list of strategic priorities and complete freedom in how they pursue them. They'll adapt to local conditions, take advantage of opportunities as they arise, and generally make life as difficult as possible for an enemy that thinks in terms of predictable patterns. This is not strategy, protested Admiral Vex Thor, one of the more conservative commanders. This is chaos. Yes, Marcus agreed simply. Organized, purposeful chaos. The Silicon Collective has studied every major battle in Veltar history. They know how you think, how you fight, how you respond to every tactical situation. But they've never faced anything like this because nothing like this has ever existed before. Queen Kethera had been silent throughout the briefing, her 6 eyes studying the tactical projections with calculating intensity. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Strategic advisor Chun, she said, you are asking me to stake the fate of an entire sector fleet on tactical theories that have never been tested at this scale. You are proposing to abandon military doctrines that have served the Veltar Empire for millennia. If you are wrong, we will lose not only this battle, but potentially the entire war against the Silicon Collective. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Your Majesty, if we fight this battle conventionally, we will lose with mathematical certainty. The enemy has superior numbers, equivalent technology, and complete knowledge of our standard tactics. Chaos may be our only advantage. And if your chaos tactics fail, if our scattered forces are indeed defeated piecemeal, then we'll have died fighting on our own terms instead of theirs, Marcus replied. And maybe, just maybe, we'll have been unpredictable enough to teach them something they didn't expect to learn. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her ancient eyes reflecting thoughts that Marcus couldn't begin to fathom. Finally, she gave a slight nod. Very well, strategic advisor. You have convinced me to gamble the fate of this fleet on human unpredictability. But understand this, success will elevate you to heights of influence you have not imagined. Failure will result not only in your death, but in the conclusion that human tactical thinking is fundamentally flawed. The consequences for your species would be significant. As the fleet began dispersing into Marcus's seemingly random task groups, He found himself alone with Princess Zarahai in one of the Eternal Sovereign's observation lounges. Through the transparent walls, they could see the other ships spreading out across space like seeds scattered on cosmic winds. "Are you confident in this plan?" Zarahai asked quietly. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching a squadron of heavy cruisers adjust course toward what appeared to be empty space. "Honestly, I am terrified. This is the largest military operation in human history, and I'm basing it on theories that could be completely wrong. But you believe it will work?" "I believe it has a better chance than anything else we could try," Marcus replied. The Silicon Collective's greatest strength is their ability to adapt and optimize. But adaptation requires recognizable patterns to adapt against. If we can stay chaotic enough, long enough, their advantage becomes a weakness. Zarahai moved closer to the viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum. "There is something I must tell you," she said, her voice carrying a weight that made Marcus turn to face her fully. "What is it?" "My mother has made a decision about the human survivors," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Regardless of the outcome of this battle, she intends to proceed with the integration program." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Integration program? Neural conditioning for the surviving populations. Behavioral modification to ensure loyalty and reduce independence. It will begin immediately after this campaign concludes. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. All of his efforts, all of the battles won, and tactical innovations developed, and humanity was still destined for slavery. Even if we win this battle, even if I prove human tactics are valuable, victory here will delay the program, not prevent it, Zarahai replied, finally, looking at him. "My mother views the human colonies as a long-term security risk. Your tactical abilities have made you valuable, but they have also demonstrated why independent humans might be dangerous." Marcus slammed his fist against the viewport, the sound echoing through the observation lounge. "So what was the point of all this? Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I hope to change your mind," Zarahai said, moving closer to him. "And because I have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" Zarahai was quiet for a long moment, her forearms clasped behind her back in the formal posture that Marcus had learned indicated serious consideration. When she spoke, her words came slowly, as if she were choosing each one carefully. "Marry me," she said simply. Marcus stared at her, certain he had misheard. "What?" "A formal union between us would create political complications that my mother cannot easily resolve," Zarahai explained, her voice gaining strength as she continued. "As my consort, you would have legal standing within the imperial household. The integration program would become a domestic matter, subject to different laws and traditions." "Princess, I don't understand Dash. If you were merely a useful alien, my mother could dispose of you, and your species at will," she continued. "But if you were family, part of the royal bloodline through marriage, the calculation changes entirely. There are precedents. Alien consorts have historically been granted significant autonomy, and their homeworlds have received protected status." Marcus tried to process what she was suggesting. "You're talking about a political marriage, a diplomatic arrangement." "I'm talking about survival," Zarahai replied firmly. "For your species, and for you personally. The integration program will begin with the most intelligent and independent humans, those most likely to cause problems. You will be the first subject, and you would prevent this by marrying me?" "I would try," she said, and for the first time since he had known her, she sounded uncertain. "There are no guarantees, but it is the best protection I can offer." Marcus walked to the other side of the lounge, his mind reeling. A marriage to an alien princess, a species he had been taught to see as monsters. Yet this same alien had saved his life, guided his development as a strategist, and was now offering to sacrifice her own position to protect his people. "What about you?" he asked finally. "What do you get out of this arrangement?" Zarahai's expression grew complex, her alien features carrying emotions Marcus was only beginning to learn to read. "Perhaps the chance to atone for the deaths I caused during the human campaign." Perhaps the satisfaction of preserving something beautiful that my people would otherwise destroy. And perhaps she met his eyes directly, perhaps something more personal. You have shown me that strength can exist without cruelty, that intelligence can coexist with compassion. These are not concepts that Veltar culture values, but I find myself drawn to them. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The tactical displays activated automatically, showing the approaching Silicon Collective Armada dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. 12,147 vessels confirmed, reported the ship's tactical officer. Multiple ship classes, full swarm deployment configuration. They are beginning formation optimization protocols. Marcus and Zarahai rushed to the command center, where Queen Kethera was already coordinating with her fleet commanders. The main display showed the collective forces spreading across space like a vast net, their movements precise and coordinated. Strategic advisor, the Queen commanded, initiate your chaos protocols. Prove to me that human unpredictability can overcome such odds. Marcus took a deep breath and activated the fleet communication system. All task groups, execute independent operations. Remember, no predictable patterns, no standard responses. Adapt, improvise, and make them guess what you're going to do next. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. Instead of massive fleets maneuvering for decisive engagement, the conflict became a three-dimensional chess game played across an entire star system. Veltar task groups appeared from unexpected directions, struck quickly at supply lines, and isolated formations, then vanished before the collective could respond effectively. The enemy's swarm intelligence, so effective against conventional tactics, struggled to process the contradictory data. Veltar ships would attack what appeared to be critical targets, then ignore them completely in favor of seemingly random objectives. Formation patterns changed constantly, with some groups operating as coordinated units, while others split into individual raiders. Collective response patterns are becoming increasingly erratic, reported the tactical analysis officer, excitement breaking through professional composure. Multiple task groups are reporting successful engagements with minimal casualties. But Marcus knew that early success was meaningless against such overwhelming numbers. The real test would come when the collective adapted their own tactics, when their distributed intelligence found patterns in the apparent chaos. All task groups, he transmitted, prepare for Phase 2 evolution. The enemy is learning. Time to teach them something new. As the battle progressed, Marcus found himself thinking not just about tactical innovations, but about Zarahai's proposal. Marriage to an alien princess might save his species from neural conditioning, but it would also bind him permanently to the empire that had destroyed his world. Could he live with such a compromise? Could he ask his people to accept protection bought with such a price? The answers would have to wait. Right now, for 1,000 Veltar ships were fighting for their lives against impossible odds, and the fate of both species hung in the balance of a battle that would reshape the understanding of interstellar warfare. In the depths of space, organic chaos met artificial order in a conflict that would determine whether intelligence could exist without predictability, whether strategy could triumph over mere numbers, and whether a maintenance engineer from Earth could save two civilizations by teaching them both new ways to think about war. The battle raged for 18 hours across the Kepler system, a chaotic dance of destruction that defied every principle of conventional space warfare. Marcus watched from the Eternal Sovereign's command center as his impossible strategy slowly began to work. The Silicon Collective's superior numbers becoming a liability as their swarm intelligence struggled to coordinate responses to increasingly unpredictable threats. Task Group 7 reports successful destruction of enemy supply depot in the asteroid belt, announced Commander Kethval from the communication station. Task Group 12 has disrupted a major formation of enemy heavy cruisers near the fourth planet. Casualties continue to remain significantly below projected levels. Queen Kythera stood before the main tactical display like a statue carved from living stone, her 6 eyes tracking dozens of simultaneous engagements across the system. "Strategic advisor," she said without turning, "your chaos tactics are proving effective. But the enemy is adapting. Their response times are improving." Marcus nodded grimly. He had been monitoring the same data, watching as the collective's distributed intelligence slowly found patterns in the apparent randomness of Veltar movements. All task groups, he transmitted, initiate Phase 3 protocols. Full creative engagement authorization. What that meant in practical terms was giving every Veltar commander permission to abandon their training entirely. Ships began using tactics that would have resulted in court-martial under normal circumstances, ramming maneuvers with shields extended, using cargo haulers as improvised weapons platforms, coordinate mining charges to create temporary gravity wells that disrupted enemy formations. The result was beautiful in its complete unpredictability. Individual Veltar captains, freed from the constraints of military doctrine, began displaying creativity that Marcus hadn't known their species possessed. Captain Zethera used her light cruiser's sensor array to jam enemy communications while simultaneously broadcasting false tactical data. Admiral Thexmore's battle group pretended to retreat in disorder, then reverse course to catch pursuing collective ships in a devastating crossfire. Enemy coordination is breaking down across multiple sectors, reported Princess Zarahai from her analysis station. Their swarm intelligence appears to be fragmenting as it attempts to process contradictory tactical inputs. But even as the Veltar forces achieved tactical successes, Marcus could see the larger strategic picture developing. The collective was learning, adapting, finding ways to counter even the most random-seeming attacks. Individual enemy ships were beginning to operate more independently, reducing their reliance on swarm coordination in favor of local decision-making. They're evolving, Marcus realized aloud. The swarm intelligence is splitting itself into smaller, more adaptable segments. Is that a problem? Queen Kythera asked. It could be, Marcus replied, studying the tactical data. Smaller AI groups are harder to confuse with chaos tactics, but they're also more vulnerable to conventional approaches. The question is whether we can adapt faster than they can. The answer came 2 hours later when Task Group 3, pursuing what appeared to be a damaged collective frigate, found itself surrounded by enemy ships that had been concealed using advanced stealth technology. The entire group, 47 vessels, and their crews was destroyed before they could send a distress signal. "They're learning to set traps," Marcus said, his heart sinking as casualty reports flowed in. "Using our own unpredictability against us by presenting false opportunities. Then, we adapt as well," Queen Kythera replied firmly. "What modifications do you recommend?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his mind racing through possibilities. The battle had become a contest of evolutionary adaptation, with both sides trying to outthink and out-evolve the other. But humans had one advantage that neither the Veltar nor the Silicon Collective possessed: the ability to make completely irrational decisions for emotional rather than logical reasons. All task groups, he transmitted new protocols. Begin implementing human emotional tactics. Explain, demanded General Thexmore from his position near the tactical displays. Human beings don't always act rationally, Marcus said, beginning to pace as his excitement built. We make decisions based on anger, fear, love, pride, revenge, emotions that can override logical calculation. The collective's AI might be able to adapt to chaos, but can it adapt to pure irrationality? He turned to address the assembled Veltar commanders. "I want you to start making decisions that make no tactical sense. Attack targets that offer no strategic value because they remind you of something personally meaningful. Retreat from winning battles because something about the situation makes you uncomfortable. Fight like you're not trying to win. Fight like you're trying to express something that can't be calculated or optimized." The silence that followed was profound. Several of the Veltar officers looked at Marcus as if he had lost his mind entirely. Strategic advisor, Admiral Ketharos said carefully, you are asking trained military officers to abandon not only doctrine and logic, but reason itself. I'm asking you to think like humans, Marcus replied. To make choices that an artificial intelligence couldn't predict because they're not based on optimization algorithms or tactical advantage. I'm asking you to be irrational on purpose. And if this irrationality results in unnecessary casualties, in the loss of strategic positions that could have been held through conventional means. Marcus met the Admiral's gaze steadily. Then, we'll have failed while being true to something greater than mere tactical efficiency. Sometimes the most important victories are the ones that can't be measured in ships destroyed or territory conquered. To his surprise, it